Yeah, I'm really happy to have this, mutual delight with you. And yeah, so um I'm really glad that you accepted this invitation to have a conversation. And yeah, like I think I shared with you that I'm a therapist working with working with in my private practice for a long time, and I'm deeply interested in suffering with, deep suffering and schizophrenia, psychosis,
Yeah.
and trauma healing. And my own therapy has, work has shifted to more bodily work. And at the same time, I'm trying to build a community for people with schizophrenia to feel
Mhm.
safe. And in this conversation, this podcast is also like a way to learn more about it. And and so I came across, your work in body therapy and your website, and I was very curious to get in touch with you to sort of
Mhm.
learn more about your work.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's what brought me into towards you while searching about embodied relational therapy. So I'm really delighted that you are here.
Yeah. And I'm appreciating your curiosity, your openness, and and your willingness to be to not have to be the expert, but to be inquiring alongside. It feels great. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah. One thing that I was really struck by in our email exchange was that when you said that you approach things from not knowing,
Mm.
like, I wanted to also understand more from you. What does the
Mm.
dance means?
Yeah,
When
yeah,
you say that, yeah.
yeah. It's a good place to start, actually.
Mhm,
Um, so if I go right back, yeah, there was some resonance when you mentioned that you're working with people who are schizophrenic. When I was a teenager, my sister became quite unwell uh, psychologically. She wasn't diagnosed with schizophrenia, but I think she probably would have been at some point.
mhm,
That ended in tragedy, and that's kind of got me into being a client and then training as a therapist. And when I trained as a therapist, I had no intention of becoming a therapist. I was doing it simply for my own processing. It was a very experiential training
mhm,
back then. Um, and I and and I so I trained with Nick Totten and with Edmondson,
mhm,
um, and they still have a real willingness to not know,
mhm,
turn up and to kind of be curious about, so what is happening here,
mhm,
and to own that they don't know all of their client's history, that we're figuring things out together. So that was a really good really good way of learning. But also, I think for me, because my intention in my training wasn't to become a therapist. It was only at the end of my training I had a kind of an epiphany that kind of like, actually, I can't save my sister. That ship has sailed. But
mhm,
I've learned these skills and capacities, and I love these inquiries. And
mhm.
so it was at the end of my training that I realized that I wanted to train as a therapist. So that also helped with this sense of not kind of starting out wanting to know how to do it, but to kind of learning something about how to do it, and then finding out, oh yeah, and I do want to do this.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
that's true.
yeah. And there's to misquote Bion or Bion, I can never remember how to pronounce his name. I think of therapy as being two frightened bodies in a room together trying to work out what's going on between them. You know,
Yeah, I
uh,
like that.
and I suppose I think I would say I've been quite lucky
Mhm,
in that. So I do quite a fair bit of training and workshops, and I will work with counselors and therapists who have completed other trainings.
mhm,
And my sense is that they can feel like they ought to know what they're doing,
mhm.
and that I've been lucky in that I was not trained to feel like I ought to know what I was doing.
Yeah.
Uh,
that's
and so there's a real freedom in being able to turn up with someone and say, "Hey, I don't know what's going on here. Let's find out."
yeah.
So I think for me, it's like I've been lucky to have been trained and supported to have a capacity to say, "Well, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm okay with that, and I trust my capacity to hold that not knowing."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's not like I'm saying I don't know and it doesn't matter. I'm saying I don't know, but I can. There's this gesture that says I don't know, and we can hold it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I do think that, how should I put this? I can sometimes feel like it's the therapists who think they know what they're doing that worry me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, the therapists who think that they're sorted out or are certain. Because I think that's where clients' experience can be dismissed or not welcomed or not fully entered into with due humility, actually. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The, ch- the challenge I have had in the last few years, I will say though, is that I now find that people are challenging me in my practice and they're saying, Stephen, you know some things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm having to kind of metabolize, oh, I do know some things.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I then manage that? So that's a really interesting
Mm-hmm.
uh, challenge, and to have also to be willing to, yeah, to be willing to take that on board,
Yes.
include that as well, so
Yeah.
that's been it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's beautiful because I feel that in this challenge as if there's there's something knowing about not knowing, right? I mean, there's an intention here, right? That not knowing, but there's something doing this repeatedly for over many decades, like I think you've for 3 decades for so like
Well, yeah, I mean, so I trained very young. I finished
mhm,
my official training when I was 23.
mhm,
And then partly because I just wasn't mature enough, didn't have enough life experience, and partly because of practical considerations, I didn't have the resources to set up a practice at that time. So
mhm,
it was some time before I actually moved into working as a therapist. I kind of moved in that direction and eventually
mhm,
did that. So I've been a therapist in terms of
mhm,
having it inside me since 1993.
mhm,
But my practice has been probably, I haven't counted, maybe 20 years or so. So
Okay. Yeah. So that's those years probably bring in, some sense of depth into this inquiry into sort of, working with not knowing. And I also felt it was very interesting to hear that you didn't got into this work with knowing that you want to be therapist. There's also like not knowing and you just opened up to it, you know
yeah,
and I think I also feel maybe the work of therapy is also like that. It's the work of growing into a person, into a human being, a
yeah.
kind human being who's growing and who's empathetic, right? And who's kind. Like I hear you when you talk about your sister. I was also curious about that relationship. If you're comfortable sharing about how was the like you shared she was going through a really hard, severe turbulence in her life emotionally. Well, she was not diagnosed, but almost like had similar kind of experiences of schizophrenia.
Yeah,
Yes.
I would say so. Yeah, I mean, when I think about so she died, and so there wasn't an opportunity really to kind of get to a point of diagnosis. But when I look at some of the facts and some of the information, and also some of her diaries and what we've heard from other people, it kind of has that feel that I
Mhm.
think she had a
Yeah.
schizophrenia diagnosis. One of the challenges for me as a therapist, that I'm still having to wake up to, is that because I got into therapy
Hmm.
pretty unconsciously, actually,
Hmm.
uh, to try and be the practitioner who could have saved her.
Hmm.
It means that what can happen is that I can project her on clients and then try and save them.
Yeah.
And and there's something I think. sort of helpfully humbling that even after decades of my own therapy and supervision and working, that
Mhm.
I still find myself falling asleep and doing that projection and having to kind of wake up. No, this isn't Catherine. This is this person, and
Yeah.
sort of falling asleep and waking up. And
Yeah.
there's something about how that keeps me humble, because it's like I can still see how my childhood material is still trying to be active and still trying to sort of
Yeah.
um, to become central, So it helps to remind me that I'm not expert, and that I
Yeah.
am with my material as my clients are, So
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's beautiful. I feel as much as it gives you motivation that you want to save, but it also you're also aware of your projection that
Mm.
you actually don't have to. But
Mm.
but when I listen to you, I sit with the sadness in my chest that it's like a sadness of a kind of um I really like how you bring this, as if this strong um sort of this or in motivation, actually this deeper feelings towards your client as well, to sort of like care for them so deeply that you motivated by that. But
Mm.
I'm sure her loss was a very a point for you that is just was a lot of mourning, perhaps a lot of grief you
Mm.
went through, perhaps. And is this how you moved into more bodily work with Nick Totten, or yeah?
I think I just got lucky. Um, so the chronology was that I went to university. I decided I wanted to do some work as clients. So I went to the university counsellor. They referred me to a private practitioner who trained with Nick Totten and M. Edmondson in what was then called self-heal psychotherapy. I picked up a leaflet in my therapist's foyer about massage training. So I went and did a massage training with M. Edmondson. And then she invited me to join the what was then called the Psychotherapy psychotherapy training with Em and with Nick. And I sometimes think that had I come across Gestalt, or had I come across different psychodynamic approaches or other approaches, then I may have ended up somewhere else. But for me, it's been it's been a really good fit. And and I suppose one of the things that I've learned to kind of stay awake to is that for me, because that was, although I'd done some voluntary counselling before that, and even some voluntary counselling training, uh, running, but that was my ground. The what was now called embodied-relational, that training was my ground. And so for me, from the beginning, psychotherapy is in the body, between bodies. And um, so that's where I start from. And then I often find myself training or meeting with or working with psychotherapists or counselors for whom working with the body is something they then move into, and are having to sometimes come up against some of the fear-based restrictions about things like working with touch. Whereas for me, that's where I started, so that's just normal. And I think for a lot of therapists, sadly, it's not. And then I'm having to actually support, invite, and train therapists to include the body more. Uh, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. So do you feel that body has really been neglected in in the way we approach therapy usually, or like in a mainstream, do you feel?
I think there's a lot of fear
Mhm.
about bodies. So it's like that there are, for example, there are body psychotherapy traditions which are based on diagnosis treatment model.
Mhm.
So, for example, I might look at someone's body, and I might look, well, I can see where the blocks are and what needs to happen to release the
Mhm.
capacity, movement, and energy in the neck, or in the jaw, or in the diaphragm. and so I'm going to intervene in this way. I might use touch, but it's very much like, it's almost like I have a white coat on. It's not a relationship process. So it's like we can give ourselves permission to work with the body in a non-relational way, or we can give ourselves permission to work relationally, but keeping the body a bit, we might include breath or muscle tension. But when we have both of these together,
Mhm.
it's I think it can be quite frightening,
Yeah.
because then we're into showing up as bodies ourselves, as
Mhm.
therapists,
Yeah.
showing up in our frailty. I've had some recent experiences of clients wanting to physically push me,
Mhm.
and myself, it's kind of brings me up against the limits of my physical strength, for example.
Like
So
actually wanting to push you
yeah,
physically.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm having to kind of make sure that I've got somewhere safe enough to land when they push me over, and
Mhm.
that we've got ways to manage it so it's safe.
Mhm.
But when we start including those kinds of slightly touch and actually being two bodies together, then I think it brings an awful lot up. And particularly, I think what it brings up is sex and sexuality.
Mhm. Mhm.
And one of the ways in which psychotherapy tries to manage sex and sexuality is just to kind of say, well, it doesn't happen here. That we do, just like we just don't go there. We don't do bodies because, whereas actually, of course, there's sexual charge.
Mhm.
Of course, that's going to come up.
Mhm.
And if we can actually speak about it, share about it,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, and be clear about where the boundaries are,
Mhm.
be clear about why we're having those boundaries,
Mhm.
um, but that to be the container for where we can actually allow people to be bodies, then there's a lot more breadth. There's a lot more. We're not cutting off bits of people. We're allowing themselves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I actually think that when we do that, when we more consciously work with
Mhm.
bodies, with movement, with the possibility of touch,
Mhm.
it really switches us on to our ethical
Mhm.
boundaries. For
Mhm.
me, it's like I can't kind of dreamily
Mhm.
um, think about sexual transference. Oh, but it doesn't matter because we don't do touch, and then something can kind of happen without me being conscious. Whereas if I'm like, okay, so this person is wanting to have some close contact,
Mhm.
how is that? What's
Mhm.
happening with sexual charge? Is that okay for them? Is that okay for me?
Mhm.
What's happening, or are we coming to an edge? How do we slow things down? So for me, it really wakes the whole thing up and makes it much more
Mhm.
available for inquiry, available for the kind of
Mhm.
conversations and sharings that actually keep people safe.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I hear you, and I feel like it's as if it's more like an enlivening process, like
Yeah,
becoming more alive from
yeah,
being very
yeah,
dead and being very
yeah.
exhausted. So that's what comes to my mind when you say sex or even sexuality or even the touch or even the desire for sort of closeness. So
Mm.
but how would you do you share about what is sexuality? Is it libido? Is it a very or like uh or is it a different, or is it like how William Rigg would talk about more are or I don't know what's organic energy, organ energy. Is that what would you talk about, or what is it that you understand by sex and
Yeah,
sexuality?
to be honest, I don't think I have a particular view about it. I think I'm more interested in how
That's
my
good.
clients are framing it.
Yeah.
So I mean, a few years ago, I took some training in Radix, Radix, which nobody has ever heard of, but which is a kind of classic Reichian bodywork modality,
Mhm.
which is very much about working with charge, working with pulsation, so working with how we get charged and we discharge and we rest, and we get charged, we discharge, and we rest. So working with the cycle, but also working with enlivenment, in particular in what's happening in the body. And and so if clients are are wanting to work with that kind of language or that kind of frame, and
Mm-hmm.
include sexual energy, then I'm up for that. If someone wants to share or explore in terms of being sexually attracted to or being sexually repulsed by, then that's fine. Or if people are just wanting to experience themselves as sexual beings.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose I do hold more of I think I have more. It's funny doing the radix training. I think I'm more open to Reich's kind of his ideas about orgone energy and about streaming and about that sense of there is energy that's flowing all the time and it gets blocked. I'm more open to that as a kind of background frame,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not necessarily bringing that forward. It's there, available if it's helpful to a particular client in a particular way.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm much more interested in how is my client framing this and what's a model that what's their language for it and how do they think about it and
Yeah.
working with.
Yeah. When you say this, would you like to share any instance with client you comes to mind, or that you feel that there was this happened where this release and the discharging energy and how it worked out, or
Yeah.
any.
Um, so I suppose when I think about physical energy, so the kind of classic Reichian way of working where I might have someone lying on the mat, I
Mm-hmm.
might be kneeling alongside them, and we are working to bring attention to bring attention to the tightness and the closeness in the muscles, working from the top of the head down through the eyes, the
Mm-hmm.
jaw, throat, the heart,
Mm-hmm.
diaphragm in particular. There's that lovely saying, isn't there? Once you get below the diaphragm, all hell breaks loose.
Okay.
Because it's a really, it's like the jaw, the diaphragm, these places where we block things from coming through.
Okay.
So working down through opening things up, and then you can get these kind of jerks and movements and kind of spontaneous releases, and there may be the kind of the breath changes, and there may be this sort of this kind of move of the head back,
Mm-hmm.
so that's one kind of classic, and or there may be movements which are angry or which are kind of assertive or demanding or rejecting, those kind of ways. There's all that. And that's much more about working with the client's process. But then there's the more relational working. So how is it? How is it between my body and my client's body? What happens if, for example, my client feels sexually attracted towards me or feels repulsed by me? And can we include that?
Mm-hmm.
Can we tolerate
Mm-hmm.
um, experiments like, so how is it when I step back? What happens in your body? How is it if I step forward? What happens if you invite me to move backwards and forwards?
Mm-hmm.
What happens in the charge level? What happens in your sense of needing to defend or needing to push away or pull in? So working more relationally with those kind of feelings,
Yeah.
but just kind of including, and kind of noticing that sense of what is it that I'm not allowed
Mm-hmm.
pay attention to,
Yeah.
and then thinking, well, how can we include that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of why a lot of this stuff doesn't happen so much is it's really frightening for me as a therapist. Actually, it's really scary. It's like I don't know what's going to happen. I know what my boundaries are,
Mm-hmm.
but I know that it's stimulating. It's troubling. It brings up all kinds of feelings in me. I might get a bit lost. Need to
Mm-hmm.
fight back. So it's not comfortable as a way
Mm-hmm.
of working with a therapist. And I think that a lot of what's unfortunately happened in certainly in the UK in terms of therapy trainings is that sometimes there can be an unwillingness for the therapist to be uncomfortable, which is a shame because I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of work involves the therapist being uncomfortable. So
Yeah.
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 One of the things I'm aware of, and you've mentioned schizophrenia as an interest of yours, is I'm aware of. I have very limited and only kind of anecdotal experience of schizophrenia, to be honest. But something about how one of my experiences, being alongside, is that it can be experienced very physically.
Mm-hmm.
that there can be sensations, and that may be the language that someone experiences schizophrenia in,
Mhm.
is sensations in the body. And of course, the complexity then is also there are sensations in the body that arise from the medications as well.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, so I have a kind of a notion that
Mhm.
um, being able to work with that,
Mhm.
being able
Okay.
to be
Mhm.
curious and interested and experiment with that can be a way of really validating the
Mhm.
experience of someone who is schizophrenic and who's wanting to work with it.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's true. So you're suggesting you're also open to working with someone who's in that sense is, carrying um similar kind of pain and and the effects of medication that allows them to be not very open to sort of like, that blocks the experience in the body as well. Yeah.
I'm not sure if I am. I know if I think about, I had an experience some years ago where somebody wanted to come and work with me and they were schizophrenic. And I
Mhm.
remember my supervisor advising me not to do that because I didn't have specific training and background in working with schizophrenia.
Mhm.
And I haven't kind of revisited that since then, and it hasn't come up for me. That kind of inquiry hasn't come to me since.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I suppose I'm thinking more about. I suppose I'm thinking more about. Say, if you're working with someone who's schizophrenic, and that's something that
Mhm.
that's something you do, and how what happens if you have more freedom, more permission to kind of notice the sensations in the body, to notice what happens
Mhm.
uh, in someone's body, and how that also relates to what happens in your body, and kind of opening that out from a basis of being comfortable working with schizophrenia, which I'm not sure I yet am, or I'm not sure that's.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
haven't really thought about that for a while, to be honest. But
Yeah.
something about how I think when we're looking at conditions which are much more impactful, like schizophrenia, I wonder if there's more fear about getting it wrong, and therefore there's more tendency to kind of move back from
Mhm.
working with, and
Mhm.
whether actually when something is more challenging like that, then what would be helpful is to step more into,
Yeah.
and how is this in your breath, and can you feel your feet, and what do your arms want to do, and how do you want to relate to me with your body?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I do agree. I mean, I agree with you because I feel like in the relational capacity, is very sort of like is very there is a lot of fear in the sense of any kind of touch. So what I come across in my work and understanding of schizophrenia is also about how there's a deeper severe traumas that are underneath. It's of course it affects physiologically in but it's also very very deeply traumatizing at a early stage, like early childhood at an infant level, which is very painful and very invisible.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so to reach that spaces, and is I think it's the body is it's because probably a mind does not remember anything from the early impressions of so when also read accounts of of, for example, some accounts where people talk about schizophrenia is also like where they're sharing that okay, sometimes the caregiver is not very attuned and is more dead and more destructive, like the is going through something, and the infant is not just neglected but also feels the world is not very safe, and at the deep level there is a mistrust,
mm,
and I think I would use the word Lang often calls is it means is like he calls ontological insecurity, which
mm,
means that the being is just feeling very unsafe in
mm,
its just existence. So
mm, mm,
um so I think if that's an experience, it's deeply like unsettling and deeply chaotic, deeply disorganized. there's like there's a sinking hole as I uh begin to sort of get in touch closer to that sense. So and there's a lot of experience is there in the body. So what I was also thinking that like so whether I work with my clients and in my own personal work, I felt like the body work began to came after almost like 4 5 years of being in ongoing work. Like initially the body did not even, there's a lot of just lot of thoughts, then feelings, then you move to body, right? And then so so I was thinking that how when you start with the body, right, how you would move into the body, how
Mm.
does it open up a lot, like in the
Yeah,
initially,
yeah,
so like that. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, one of the things that I'm keen to do, particularly particularly when we're going into any kind of working through the body, is culturally, I think we can be very defended, very skilled at defending against interventions which are verbal.
Mm-hmm.
We speak and listen all the time. So when someone says something to me, I can keep that out really easily. When someone invites me into my body, because I'm not so familiar with that as a generally we're not so familiar with that as a relational channel, I may not be so defended. So I might drop into some quite challenging, difficult, disturbing material quite quickly. So for me, the starting place is always so how are we going to come out?
Mm-hmm.
But, let's establish how we get back to the beach before we go in the water.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So often at the beginning of going to any kind of working with the body is I'm going to be interested in asking people. So when I first start working with people is how do you, if you're in a difficult state, how do you bring yourself back? How do you bring yourself back into a calmer, safer, comfortable state? And all those kind of things that people like Babette Rothschild and others teach us, things like looking around at objects in the room and naming them,
Yes.
putting weight through the feet, sitting either sitting on a cushion on the floor or sitting in a chair that has really solid arms, and that there aren't ways of doing that work for everybody. So my first inquiry is, how do you get back into a settled, safe enough state?
Mm-hmm.
Let's try that. Did that actually work? Because somebody might have learned, oh, deep breathing is a good thing, so I'll do that. But actually, it just agitates them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I want to
Yes.
check it out, find
Yeah.
out. And,
Yeah.
and if it doesn't work, then we find, so the first thing is to establish that kind of safety. So if someone gets into psychological trouble, they
Mm-hmm.
get over that we have together have a way of them coming out. So there's that.
Yeah.
In terms of starting, so there's this whole thing about, so often when I'm training counselors, often what happens is that people come into their therapy room, the counselor and the client are sitting on a chair, and how do we get out the chairs? How do we actually get to standing up or lying on the floor or sitting on the floor and moving around, whatever it might be? And um, I suppose I've got more comfortable with that the more I've worked. So for me, for example, I usually greet people standing up. And then if people want to sit down, that's fine, but we might not.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm lucky enough in that I can work in this room that has a whole variety of different kinds of places to sit, different heights, different textures, different solidity. And I don't have a therapist chair.
I see.
Or there is a therapist chair, but I tend not to sit in it. My clients tend to sit in it more than I do. So there's something about if we start by being conscious that we're in a physical space together as two bodies, and we start there, and then do we want to make a choice to sit
Yeah.
and do some listening? But that's a choice.
Right. Right. Exactly. That's
Yeah, I
more
think,
like a choice.
yeah,
It's
and
you
I
if
also, sorry,
Yeah.
carry on.
No, I was just saying if you want to move into just standing and moving around, then you would like to just allow create it more dynamic and not a very static into spaces, but more
Yeah,
aware of the body. Because I was also thinking that when you try to create, then you try to get in touch with the body part, which is which is safer also, where the safety is. Does everyone has some parts in the body which feel safer, or in your work, do you feel that sometimes people don't have safety in the body? The moment they get in touch with the body, it's just too
Yeah,
scary and
yeah,
no safety around. It's just a
yeah,
deep
yeah,
hole inside.
yeah. And for some people, if that's the case, I'm going to be saying, let's stay in our thinking.
Okay.
If that's going to just take you to overwhelm, let's not do that. Let's stay in our thinking. And then if someone is wanting to then move into body experience, then my question is, what's the smallest experiment we can make?
Mhm,
What's
mhm,
the tiniest thing? Is it noticing the flow of air through your nostril a bit?
mhm,
Is it just touching your ear and feeling that you've touched your ear?
mhm, mhm.
And then let's come back to thinking. And how was that? So it's like making the experiments as small as possible.
Exactly.
Because if we just go straight in, and
Yeah.
if people are familiar with that, it can
Yeah.
just be overwhelming in a way that's really unhelpful.
So you wouldn't encourage like just a breakdown or a collapse, like, like disintegrate fully. You wouldn't.
No,
You wouldn't.
no.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of resistance. You
Okay.
know, it's like because resistance is what got us here. It's like we didn't have resistance, we probably wouldn't have survived.
Mhm,
So I'm interested in kind of making an offer or an invitation, and then I'm really keen to hear the no or I'm not sure. And
mhm,
that figure, that gatekeeper figure, that's someone I want to respect. That's someone I want to. It's almost like I sometimes think of it as you wanted to get into a nightclub
mhm,
and there's a bouncer on the door. Maybe you want to get in the back door, but you want to get into the nightclub. There's a bouncer on the door. I'm not going to want to push past. I'm not going to want to beguile or trick or bribe, or I'm going to want to say, okay, fine. I'm not going in
mhm,
until you're comfortable with me. And if you're never comfortable, that's fine. Shall we share a cigarette?
mhm,
And tell me about your job and tell me
mhm,
about why it is that you need to do this gatekeeping.
mhm, mhm,
And I'm wanting to track whether how much I'm really willing to not be trying to get past. And if I notice that I am, then
mhm,
I'm be like, what, Stephen, come back.
mhm,
You're here with a gatekeeper. You're here with some resistance that's saying no,
mhm,
that's enable this person to survive the experiences they've had.
mhm.
And that's often where the work is, it's just that hanging out and telling,
Yeah.
hearing that,
Yeah.
respecting the gatekeeper.
Yeah. But yeah, that's true. I think it's important to have sense of sort of boundary around it to make sure that it doesn't overwhelm the client. But I'm also thinking that if it's because the resistance is so strong sometimes that the client or the person themselves wouldn't want to sort of, would actually will strengthen the defense, will strengthen the resistance.
Mm.
And as a practitioner, how would you move that with it has to be collaborative. There's no sense.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
I suppose my experience is that the more I'm really authentically willing to receive, respect, and celebrate the resistance, then the more likely that the resistance is going to um, consider the possibility of allowing me to see a little bit of something else.
Mhm, mhm.
Because there's a real issue of sovereignty in this.
That's true.
Uh, yeah, and that might take years, you know. And for me that feels, yeah. I'm not sure that anything good ever comes of. I mean, it's interesting when I think about Reich's work and the kind of tradition of Reich's work, and like I guess in the 60s and 70s in California, it was all about catharsis and breaking through, and a lot of pushing. And then when I think about Will Davis, who's a practitioner based in France, and he's written a couple of pieces on working with the in-stroke. So rather than about going forward and expressing, to actually work with coming in and the gentleness and the coming back to self.
Mhm,
And there's something about as as body psychotherapy, some traditions, and our tradition in particular, has become more relational.
Mhm,
There's much more of a willingness to, in practitioners, to tolerate slowness, to
mhm,
tolerate just being with the stuckness.
mhm.
And actually, that's when so melting rather than breaking, I guess.
That's beautiful.
So there's a need for me to tolerate things not changing, things not getting better. I had a really useful formative experience, which was that I used to work in as a teaching assistant, then a teacher, and I worked with some children who had a condition which meant that their skills, their capacities were only going to get worse. They weren't going to learn more things. They were only going to, because of the condition that they had. And so my job was about slowing down the decline.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
that's a kind of a touchstone for me because it's like it helps me to check, am I pushing for success? Am I pushing for change? Or am I willing to tolerate how it is,
mhm,
which
mhm.
might be stuckness?
Yeah.
And and I know from my own process, it's like if I'm really willing to be stuck, if I'm really willing to get to a point of utter despair where I know it's not going to get better, I really know that, that's when things change.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Like to stay with this state of grief,
Mm,
there's a grief in that. There's a loss. There's a sadness in that. There's also loneliness in that. There's just there's a lot of courage uh
mm,
to
mm,
to be with that and then meet this child, this person who's uh not going to progress or not going to grow into, well, I wonder what was the condition. This is some
what can be
degenerative, yeah,
like
it's
it was
some neurologically degenerate, like not growing. And so yeah, that could just yeah, be like working with any chronic
mm,
challenge, like
mm,
working maybe with dementia or
mm,
working
mm,
with Alzheimer or not be or somebody like that where you just, yeah, where like I remember one of my friend, she's working in old age home. She was telling me that she goes there and then when she goes to work with them, that she the people there don't remember her next day what they talked about. And so so that just makes her always like an always have to start from scratch
mhm,
and
mhm,
like, not knowing, like not
mm,
knowing what they really know, what they really are, and how
mm,
much we are. And again, you have to get to know them and start again and build a connection and start again. Even so, the forgetting is so hard for, I mean, for the people in the old age home, okay, yeah, there's forgetting happening naturally, but for person like a worker working practitioner, it's hard to realize that they're forgotten completely and everything, and there's just
mm,
there's a starting from the scratch. So
mm,
yeah,
mm,
so I really resonate with this very courageous experiences you've shared about
mm.
how yeah, that this journey was for you to not know, like, and to be with someone who's just deteriorating. Yeah.
I'm aware that we haven't talked about wild therapy at all. I'd like
Yes.
to
Yes.
touch on.
Sure. Please go ahead.
And I'm just thinking about what do I want to say about that? So Nick Totten, who kind of co-created self-heal psychotherapy and then created embodied relational therapy. I would say that for him, what happened was that working with the body, working with human bodies, there comes a point where how do we not include other bodies? How do we not include the space, the room, the insects, the weather, the trees, the climate, the other than human, the more than human? And so it's like there's a natural progression or an inclusion in working as if we are not disconnected from the rest of the world, you know,
Yes.
because we're not, we
Yes.
depend. on other kinds of
Mhm.
other kinds of beings. And so he developed wild therapy, and I trained in that, and I ran some trainings in that. And I'm curious about what happens when the experience of schizophrenia meets uh, mm, more ecological working. So for example, working outdoors in wilder environments, walking or sitting um, or whatever it might be,
Yeah.
and how I know from my work with clients when I'm working in wilder environments that most of the holding, most of the work happens between my client and the environment.
Mhm.
But actually, there's an unfolding. There are relational things that happen,
Yeah.
uh, and we might be exploring things together. We might be doing some relational work between us, or it may just be more about what happens between my client and the environment, and I'm doing less.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
hold time, and if there are any roads, stop them from getting run over. In a way, that's kind of. Um, but we know, I mean, the research, more and more research is telling us that being in wilder environments is good for us, that it helps
Yeah.
our psychological well-being.
Yeah. Yeah. I was wondering, like, what would be the holding in, like, for in wild therapy, there's like you're moving outdoors and you're having building relationship with nature, and things are around you and not just in a therapy room. Even
Mm,
even it feels like the way you work, it's not a proper sitting together. It's not proper, like it's not like a as conventional therapy, like sitting and talking. It's
mm,
it's like you're moving around dynamic. Already there's so much
mm,
like there's a interaction happening with so many objects in the room
mm,
while moving around. There's more 360-degree right of view, right?
mm,
Like it's not just sitting in like
mm.
90, 180, but it's more like there's more flow dynamic, and so I'm also so this kind of therapy is already dynamic, and in wild therapy you just go outside. It's outdoors and
Well, it doesn't have to be outdoors. I mean, you can do wild therapy in a room. It's about just including the environment, and it might include things like the distress and despair about the breakdown of the climate. So it might be including those kind of ecological awarenesses. But certainly, when I'm working with someone in the room, I'm curious about what the ants are up to. I'm
Mhm,
curious about the interaction between my clients and the plants, and also the harder objects.
mhm,
So so what happens so things like where does my client choose to sit, or where do they move, or what
mhm,
cushions do they prefer, or do they greet the plants or the different soft toys or stones or
mhm,
whatever.
mhm,
Uh, but the other thing I want to say is that if we think about most of what we're working with,
mhm,
most of what we're working with, I would suggest, it's a broad generalization, but mainly we're working with the relational experiences of trauma that people have had in rooms.
mhm,
Now, I have worked with people who have had traumas which are outside and traumas between them and the environment. But if we think about most of our work is about what happened between us and our caregivers, what's happened between us and other human beings, and most of that has been in rooms.
yes.
So why would we put clients in the most scary place, which is in a room with another human being?
Yeah,
So when we're working outdoors, for many people, A, they can run away
I see.
much more easily, yeah. And B, we're designed. It's like we haven't our evolution hasn't caught up with being in rooms. We're designed to be outdoors in natural environments. And so our body and it's strange because even though it can be a more open environment, people can feel more held because it's like they've got these kind of biological references: tree, wind in the leaves, running water, stone, grass, animals, insects. It's like that's what we're designed for. So the system can kind of relax a bit for many people. For some people, it doesn't work at all.
Yeah.
Um, and so there can be both a greater containment, actually, a greater sense of safety, and also a greater sense of freedom as
Yes.
well.
Yes, but do you think it can also become like an escape, right? Like, because you said that, okay, they can run away, right? They will never want to meet themselves because eventually what they have to do is like, I wonder, meet themselves also, like
Yeah.
deep down, right? So if, what if they keep escaping and running?
Yes, yeah, it can happen, and so what I like is that sometimes what happens is that I'm working with someone in the room, and we have shared sessions in the room. They're interested in working outdoors. We do some interesting work outdoors, but then sometimes the more kind of intimate relational work is less comfortable for people to do outdoors. It depends. I mean, if you're running a residential outdoors
Hmm.
and there for 4 or 5 days, then the kind of intimate relational work might be more accessible. But sometimes what happens is, not that unfrequently, is that people want to come back into the room to do that kind of perhaps more delicate, contained
Hmm.
relational. But I find it's actually my clients generally who will
Hmm.
be noticing that
Hmm.
that desire. Actually, can we come in and be in the room and do this work? Because people, for example, are less likely to feel comfortable lying down, perhaps working through the sectors of the body, having loud expressions,
Hmm.
not being, those kind of things. They might be less comfortable doing that outdoors. Some people aren't. Some situations are easier.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there are definitely advantages in both. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And just one more thoughts coming to my mind is about that loud expression. Is it like so there's this experience of a lot of kind of experience comes out, like let's say rage comes out, like for example in breath work, like when I was doing, you just like, like scream a lot, like sort of like there's a rage, there's a lot of aggression comes out, and so is it like when you're with body with either in wild therapy, because I'm also wondering the wild, is it just a wild because it's in the wild in the nature, or is it wild because it also brings the wild side of ours?
Yeah, it's definitely both. It's recognizing that we are animals. It's
Okay.
working from the basis that we are animals, and wild in the sense of not in the sense of chaos, but in the sense of natural rhythms.
Hmm. Hmm.
So uninterfered with, so we can allow our breath to do what it needs to do. So starting to notice that actually, other than human systems are not chaotic, they're actually organized and rhythmic, and they
Hmm.
make sense. And if we can allow the freedom to be animal, then
Hmm.
like if we allow our bodies to move, then they start to move rhythm. They might be chaotic at first, but then they'll move into a rhythm.
Yeah.
So it's not about chaos, it's actually about finding the natural order, one might say, that's in the
Yeah.
system.
Yeah. It's it's beautiful. So it's letting the natural chaos to run through to find it unfold into a rhythm, its natural rhythm. So the unfold, the opening and then collapsing. It may seem like when it's
Mm.
happening, it may seem like just chaotic, but it's just the uncertain pulse follows it and finds its own rhythm. Yeah,
Mm.
that's beautiful. Yeah. And yeah, I was just checking in how you feeling now and what's your sense. We have time, right? Just to check in with you.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah,
okay, good
yeah.
to hear. Okay. Yeah. So that's very, very I mean I'm really enjoying this conversation with you. And one thing that was stuck with me was that when you're working with people uh in the room or outside, um does for example, does the violence comes in? Because for example, like people who are raped or sexually abused, they have experience of strong of being, sort of internalized, sort of like a dislottery. And so while working with them, or
Mm.
just there's a lot of violence. So is there is there a part when when you're working with someone closely with body, that does the violence comes out as well, or how do you work with that? Or
Yeah, yeah. So again, the starting point is how do we keep ourselves safe? So
Mhm,
if someone is needing to say be physically angry,
mhm,
I'm going to start by saying when I say stop, I want you to stop. Let's just check. Let's just make a movement. I'm going to say stop. You stop. Great, got that. No. And if you want to stop, you say stop, and we stop and we come out. So getting all those in place.
Mhm,
And then start to talk about what kind of movement it might be. So there might be a movement in the arm. And I might
mhm,
say, that looks like a punch.
mhm,
Be a
mhm,
movement in the leg. That looks like a kick. Is it a kick? Okay, so let's think about an experiment we might make.
mhm,
And so then how do we offer that in a safe way?
mhm,
So for example, with punching, I'm always aware of the wrist. I'm wanting to
mhm,
pay attention. Sometimes I'll encourage slapping because that can be safer.
mhm,
Uh, I use cushions quite a
mhm,
lot. I
mhm,
hold a cushion against my body and have someone hit the cushion.
mhm.
Uh, and again, I might hold something against my leg and have people kick the thing against my leg. We use classic Reichian bit of kit, which is a tennis racket.
Okay.
I think it's great because I mean, this ceiling unfortunately isn't quite high enough, but you can really get your whole body,
Okay.
and
I
you
just.
can do that with eye contact, and you can really allow things to kind of flow through. So it's having the confidence and having the structures that mean that people can express
Mhm,
that they can do that, but it's got containment to keep everybody safe.
mm,
So and also starting with the smallest experiments again. I'm not going to, because one of the things is that I mean I might just feel a bash and bash and bash and bash and bash, but if I'm not in it,
mhm.
it doesn't achieve anything. So what I'm looking for is, can you feel the movement inside? So if someone's going to punch, it's like, can you feel the impulse to punch? Because that's where the change happens, is inside. And
Okay.
we may never actually get to punching. It's like, but can we inhabit it? And it might be about slowing it down, making it smaller, giving it some rather than just kind of blindly slap, which just gets everyone tired and potentially injured. So
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah, and I've worked, so I've done a lot of work on this space to make it soundproof, so people
That's
can be really loud, and that's fine.
yeah, that's very good because that allows some containment as well. Okay, whatever happens in this room doesn't go out. I think that's
Mm.
really beautiful, and I really like what you said about the slowness of it, because even if somebody is just discharging a lot of strong, heavy emotions or even negative emotions, they're not sort of discharging in a way that is going outside it. They're experiencing in their body, being like slowly moving into the body and inhabiting it actually, and then feeling
Mm.
it rather than just like a lot of times when we break something or we do boxing, I think we just throw our feelings onto the something, but
Mm.
not really like
Mm.
just displace out, not just really uh, you know in hold it
Can
inside.
be the core of us.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mm.
Yeah, like be in the
Can
center.
be in the core of us.
Yeah, chorus. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah, and yeah. So that's true. That to come to that core is something to sort of like find an anchor there, right? And yeah, that's beautiful. That it's just makes people more slower. Yeah.
Mm. I notice I'm left with an image. So yeah, I think it's so. Yeah, I'm left with an image which is of someone who is schizophrenic going for a walk with a therapist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's just an image I'm left with. And it
No,
makes me smile when
no, that's beautiful. I would like to be curious more about it. What does this, you know, like, can you imagine the conversation in that, or is just, or like, like walk, like, I mean, it's also like a sort of like a, sense you're carrying, right? Like, you know,
I think. I think one aspect of it is it one of the great things about working outdoors is that it can really democratize the relationship a bit more.
Mhm,
So the classic thing that happens in wild therapy is the therapist falls in the river and the client helps them out, you know. So it involves our own physical vulnerability as therapists. But there can be things like who's choosing the pace, who's choosing the direction.
mhm, mhm.
And so there can be a sense. So if I'm schizophrenic and I'm going to see a therapist, then it's like I can experience that as I'm problematic and I'm going for treatment. Whereas if I'm going for a walk with a therapist, then it's like we're going for a walk together, side by side, and I might want to go over there,
Mhm. Yeah,
and we might have a negotiation about that. But it's like there's something I'm going to sit down. Actually, can we go and get a coffee? You know, and something about how all of that helpfully challenges the therapeutic frame,
yeah.
but also that I'm likely that something is likely potentially from being aware of the trees or the sound of the birds or the sound of the insect or the weather and how that might actually be resourcing. It might be helpful.
Mhm, mhm. Because
And it's also I'm more likely to be in.
mhm,
So
yeah, that's true. Because often in schizophrenia, there's this or like a very like a tunnel vision I've experienced when I find in my work that there's a tunnel vision, like it's like a narrow vision where it's hard to be wider, like wider in terms of like when you're in nature, you're actually I think why for some people therapy room is safer because it's very static. It's not changing, it's not dynamic, it's not no, but the room is locked, like not locked but closed. It's also feels like safe. But for someone who
yeah,
who's have a hyper vigilance, like or like like or the sense of like I think so they I think they call it like so in psychosis usually there's always as if the sense that there's a predator somewhere, right? Like there's always a threat. So that's why the paranoia comes from feeling that there's always a threat, and there's always a paranoia. Oh, so so that's why there's a hypervigilance around it. So most of antipsychotic, what they do is that they diminish the predator from the the landscape. That okay, there's no predator, so hypervigilance goes away. The client can relax, and the nervous system can they're not any more sympathetic dominant. The body can relax. So it's also a sense that so often, yeah, so if the person goes into the walk outside and it's always changing. I'm also wondering, how would that work out with, let's say, with let's say hypervigilance. So it's also like what makes the person feel really safe, in that sense, or what does hold them as they walk around.
mm,
Yeah, that's the question I think becomes.
yeah. I mean, it can cut both ways. Yeah, yeah, it can cut both ways. I think for some people, there's going to be a choice. Actually, I want to be in a contained environment, and I want things to be still, and I want them to be quiet. And for some people, um, may have had experiences of being locked in rooms, may have had experiences of feeling like they can't get away. They may have had traumatic things that happened in rooms, and so there can be relaxation when they're outdoors. And for some people, there may be people have favorite places or
Oh,
favorite walks or favorite sit spots, and they may want to take you to that place. This is where I sit. And what happens is that there's a man with a dog and he walks past, or I hear the sound of that bird, or see how this tree is doing at this time of year. And so there's some power and there can be some rhythmic predictability. So I think it's different for people.
exactly.
I'm aware of the time.
All right. Thank you so much for being
I'm
here.
becoming
Yeah.
probably to go fairly soon, but I'm just wondering what else we might want to
No, I
pay
think
attention to.
yeah, I think we have covered a lot of ground, and I think I'm really, really thankful to you for giving such a, like interesting overview about your life and your journey and on embodied relational therapy and wild therapy. So we just bring it to our close. Just maybe a final question that, you know, just would you want to share any sort of books uh, or
Yeah,
anything that you found it very influenced you? Yeah.
yeah. I so lots. I mean, I really like the original core text of embodied relational therapy, which is called Reichian Growth Work, Reichin, Reichian Growth Work, written by Nick Totten and Edmondson. I also like Nick's book, Wild Therapy.
Okay.
Those are two books that comes to mind. And one particular, it's a pamphlet that's available on Amazon, which was written by Nick Totten and my colleague Alison Priestman,
Hmm.
which I really recommend. It's called How to Be a Bad Therapist.
Okay. Thank you for that. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. How to be not a good therapist and a bad therapist. Okay. So,
How to be a bad, how to be a bad therapist.
yeah.
It's very liberating.
Okay. And
So I want to say thank you. It's been
yeah,
really delightful to
yeah,
spend this time with you. Thank you.
exactly. Exactly. It's really wonderful to talk to you. Uh, just like this short question, what gives you hope in life? Just last,
Okay.
yeah.
I think one of the things is people's courage and willingness to be with really difficult material and to allow that to to when I witness people who become different because they're willing to be courageous with their difficult material. And also every time someone makes someone else a cup of tea and doesn't charge them for it. There's something about how, for all the kind of capitalism in the world, there are ways in which we're always going to be anarchists, and that gives me hope.
Okay. All right. That's good. Yeah. And what advice would you like to give to young therapists?
Oh, um, have a lot more have a lot more therapy than you think you need.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a real concern that young therapists will think I can just do this minimum amount. And the thing that's taught me more than anything else is all of the personal psychotherapy that I continue to be in.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, great. So that's all from me. I'm so glad you answered all the questions and we went so deeper into this discussion. And I'm sure everyone probably gonna see this, probably enjoy. So I'm so much thankful to your time and your
Oh,
dedication to this work. It really appreciate this, Stephen. Yeah.
and me too. Thank you. Go well, and I hope we meet again somewhere somehow.
Yes, yes. I'd love to.
So
And
I'm going to go have some lunch now. So
yeah, yeah.
so go
Okay.
well. Bye for now.
Okay. All right. Bye. You should have your good lunch.